Go.
Hi from Dr. Barry here in Melbourne. I'm now going to cross to New Zealand to Bill, and of course Melissa is here in Melbourne already, and we're all ready to go with lots and lots of information. So good afternoon, Bill and Melissa.
Good afternoon, Barry.
Good afternoon, but I'm not actually in Melbourne. As you can see, I'm on a deserted island, you know, keeping safe from all this virus stuff.
Well, if you cross over the other side, you'll find me near the waterfall.
On the other side of the island.
Yeah, it's a long walk.
Okay, Barry, that was a great video that you and Melissa did, and I congratulate Melissa on her study and perseverance in getting that up. It was great work, but there were a few questions that you wanted cleared up. Was that right?
Melissa.
Yes, well, on Barry's website, there's quite a few questions there in relation to it. It does seem that some people are still a bit confused about perhaps what they're putting up on the PPSR. Also within the groups that studied with you here in Australia, there are also some further questions as to, you know, applications of the PPSR, some of the terms that are the key terminology that is used on the website, etc.
Okay, well, hopefully, look, I'll flick over to the PPSR, the New Zealand screen.
Oh, go ahead.
Okay, we need to first go to the Personal Property Securities Register. And like Melissa said the other day, it gives you all the details here, but the details, the debtor details over there, it is the grantor. So we'll cover that in a minute. I've done a little presentation, which I'll take you through on the debtor details, but I first want to go down here to registering your finance statement. Now, we have done a finance statement up for Australia. That's now completed, isn't it, Melissa?
Yes, in Australia it's termed a verification statement.
Yep. Okay, so registering your finance statement, a lot of people were confused about the comments I read, that they were confused about the debtor and they didn't want to be part of the debtor and that sort of thing. So I've done a little presentation. Now there is a video on ours. There will be on yours too. You can actually click on that video right there and it will bring up the details and show you the same as you did the other day, Melissa. So the relationship between the real man and the straw man. So the real man is identified by a pulse and the straw man is identified by a piece of paper. So we'll look at the relationship. Now, the father created a son, or in Melissa's case, a daughter. Now, he didn't realize that by registering, so the father registered his son, who now became the Holy Ghost. So now we have the threesome there, the Father, Son, and Holy Ghost, which they tell you in the churches. So let's look at that relationship just a little bit further. The Son is identified by the first, if he's only got one name, or the first and middle name, so John Henry. And if you look in their world, in their registration system, it's identified by a printout. Now, I've already spoken to you, Melissa, about a printout that someone is going to have to find the printout there because the one that you've been given is the wrong one. That's a copy of the form your parents filled out, not a copy of the entry in the book. Now, the printout over here comes on security paper, which tells you it's a valuable instrument if it's on security paper. So someone will have to find that printout, extract, whatever it is. In America, it's called the live birth certificate. Now, Doe is the surname of the Holy Ghost. So if you look at your driver's license or your birth certificate, you'll see that on one line, you have the given name, which is John Henry, and the next line down identifies a different person, which is Doe or the surname. Now, that is identified by the birth certificate. And then when we look a little bit further, we see that the living is the lawful side of the ledger, and the legal is the dead side of the ledger. So John Henry comes on the living side, Doe or the birth certificate goes on the dead side or the legal side, because that's their system and they can do what they like in their system. They're a private company. Now, John Henry, being a living person, can sign. Doe can't do a thing. It's a piece of paper. John Henry is the creditor. He's the living. So learning to separate these people on the PPSR is going to show you whether you succeed or not. Now, Doe is under administration, and he is the debtor or the grantor. Now, Administration Act. Now, this is the Administration Act. You will have a similar one over there. Now, there's a couple of things here that we need to really look at, and that's administrator means any person to whom administration is granted and includes a trustee corporation. Now, if you remember at the conference, I told you what includes means, but I'll just go through that again. Expressio unius est exclusio ulterius. All maxims are in Latin. Okay, so the exclusion of one excludes the others. So when they say includes a corporation, it means only a corporation. Okay, so if we go back to the Administration Act, administrator means any person to whom administration is granted and includes a trustee corporation. Okay, so that's the first thing that we need to look at. Now, the second thing we need to look at is de facto relationship. Now, this is rather interesting. De facto, in fact, indeed, actually, this phrase is used to a past action or a state of affairs which must be accepted for all practical purposes, but it is illegal or illegitimate. Thus, an office, position, or status existing under a claim or color of right, such as a de facto corporation. Now, when you look at it, we are in a de facto relationship with the straw man. Okay, so thus, an officer, king, or government de facto is one who is in actual possession of the office or supreme power, but by usurpation or without lawful title. Okay, so knowing that we're in a de facto relationship is going to help us in this. So de facto relationship. Now, there's one more that I really need to point out. The next part is intestate. Includes a person who leaves a will but dies intestate so as to some beneficial interest in his or her real or personal estate. Now, if you understand what that means, that is what is in our Treasury Direct account. So if we die intestate, it means that we haven't got rid of the res or apportioned the res to our estate. Through from the Administration Act to this act here, the Property Relationship Act, and we'll go down to de facto partner, has the meaning given to it by section 2C. So we'll go to 2C. Meaning of de facto partner. For the purposes of this act, a person in another person's de facto partner if they have a de facto relationship with each other. Okay, so now we're starting to dig deeper and deeper and deeper into the matrix here, Barry, to see what this is all about. So now, when we realize that the debtor or the creditor is only a piece of paper and we're in a de facto relationship with that one, then we have to apply another rule, doctrine of acquiescence. Under the doctrine of acquiescence, as well as the maxim in law, which states that silence shows consent, He who does not deny agrees. The appellee's silence constituted their agreement with the appellant's arbitration proposal, terms and conditions under the legal doctrine of tacit procuration. So now what we do when we are filling out a security agreement, Barry,
Yep.
is that we ask the piece of paper that we're in a de facto relationship with if he agrees to the terms and conditions that we are offering. So once we have agreement, then we can proceed with our security agreement. Now, because you asked the piece of paper, you say, excuse me, Mr. Turner, do you agree to the terms and conditions? Do we have an agreement? Oh, silent acquiescence. So, okay, so now that we have agreement, we can proceed with our putting our claim onto the PPSR. Now, they do this all the time, Barry, and it's just that we're learning all the tricks now, and unfortunately, I'm sharing them with you. So there is nothing to fear about putting your registering your financing statement on the PPSR. It is for your benefit, because if you go to a finance company to get finance for a motor vehicle or anything like that, the first thing they do is a security agreement, and then they lodge that on the PPSR. We're doing exactly the same thing for an inanimate object that we have a de facto relationship with. And if that inanimate object agrees by silence, acquiescence by silence, then we have an agreement. And to have a binding contract, you must have agreement. Right. Has that made it a little more clear? Oh, now there was one other question there. Do we need to send our financing statement to the government? No. We keep that. We can send them certified copies if they request it, but they never do. They don't ask the finance companies for their financing statements. They keep them under lock and key. They're private property. And if we have a contract between us and the piece of paper, then a trust is formed, and so we are trusted with the secret. So there is no need to show that document to anyone.
Thank you so much, Bill. I think that would have clarified quite a bit up for a lot of the audience out there, particularly in relation to a few different things, one of them being, how do we get that separation of the parties and reflect that on the PPSR? I know that there were quite a lot of questions there regarding how do you even present the names on the PPSR. People are still back in that kind of argument, or that fear about how they actually form up the names. And I think what you've given there really shows that difference between who the living is, who the debtor or the grantor is, and why we're not putting a surname together with the living entity, and why we're referring to the grantor as that surname, birth certificate, trust entity. So for one thing, I hope that does clarify for people why it's being formed in this way. Another thing is...
And just if I could just come in there, when you do the surname, you could put the birth certificate number after it, but it's even more powerful if you put the Cusick number that it's trading under. Now, I haven't covered Cusick with you guys yet, but I have my Cusick number, and when I use that, that is even more powerful. I got it about 3 years ago, my Cusick number, and when you use that, it is very, very powerful. Now, the printout, when you put John Henry in, you can use the printout number. Now, you guys are still to get your printouts. They're hiding them quite well over there. So someone's going to have to do a bit of research, and I trust you two fine chappies there are going to.
Well, you've opened a can of worms now. There's going to be at least 1.4 million people wanting to know, and perhaps even including myself, where do we get this Cusick number from, Bill? And that you're going to have to answer this, because I can't.
Oh, sorry, Barry, that's going to cost you a lot of money.
Well,
okay, so yeah, you can collapse the trust. Is that a good idea? I'm not
No.
totally.
No, you've told us.
I'm not totally certain. Now, if you did that, you would do it with a deed, okay? So a deed to the right people would collapse the trust, and then you would get everything that is in that trust.
And then
Now, the way that I believe that you should be doing it is that you should be, instead of getting dividends every month, you know, like everything that's exported from our countries, we're supposed to get a dividend on that. So that goes into our Treasury Direct account. But what happens is we then have utility companies called power supply companies, telephone companies, and all these others that come and ask us for our monthly dividends. Now, in places like Iraq, they told me that they never paid for power, they never paid for telephones, they never paid rent. They got all of that given to them by the government because that was their share of the common wealth.
yeah.
Now, in our countries, that's used by these companies, so they're robbing us blind. Instead of paying us the dividend, they're actually charging us. So if you and this is what Melissa and I are going, and Warren are going to be working on tomorrow. We're going to do a Zoom on that, and we're going to try and I've got some new information here. Now, I know it's all done through Inland Revenue because they are the accountants for the Treasury. So when you do it right, now I know going back 2016, I sent a tax return in and I left the figure blank. Now, I know what I should have done now was that I should have put my Cusick number and said, I need a return on this amount.
Smart.
Okay, now what happened? What happened was I got a phone call, and for an hour and a half, they tried to get me into contract. And I avoided contract. Now, the next day, someone rang me again. They had to get me out because the guy said to me, oh, what do you think, it's about $1 billion or something? I said, well, it could be more, it could be less. I'm not quite certain. But you being the accountants for the Treasury should know that. Anyway, the next day I got another call and he kept me on the phone for 3/4 of an hour. And he eventually made a few threats, and I was driving on the motorway in Auckland to get to an appointment, and I said, look, let's forget it for the moment. And so I let it ride, but I might be doing that again, but I'll show you.
What's the answer to this Cusick number, Melissa? I don't think we stand a hope in hell. What's your opinion?
Look, all we're doing on the PPSR is showing the differentiation between the parties. We're establishing that this is a living, and these are some of the documentations that is associated with that living. Whereas on the other side, we've got the grantor here, which is an organisation. It's related to that birth certificate. It's whether you put the birth certificate number or Cusick number if you're able to access that, but it is very hard. Not necessary though. Like, as long as you can show that separation between the parties, that's really all you need to do is show that clarity and that you know who you are and who the other party is. Right.
I'm still thinking about that Cusick number, and all these people are going to ask that question. So, Bill, can you please tell people whether they can get that, or whether it's impossible, or whether it's even worth a while looking to try and get their money out of their Cusick number?
Barry, anyone who any one of the financial traders will tell you about Cusick numbers. They're trading them all the time. And if you go onto the Securities Exchange Commission, you can actually go and look up bonds on the Security Exchange Commission site, and you will see where the bonds are being offered, they have the Cusick number with them. So like in the case of Cusick Major, you have the birth certificate has a Cusick Major, the printout has a Cusick, or over in Australia, it's the extract. Or in America, it's the live birth certificate. There is a Cusick number for those two. Those are the two Cusick majors. But the Cusick minors are your driver's license, your passport, any other things, any number that you've been given by that company, called the Australian government or the New Zealand government, any of those cards or numbers you've been given, which are trading, they have a Cusick number attached. They will be Cusick minors.
Yes, but Bill, the bottom line, you're like being a politician today now. The question is, yes or no, is it possible for the average Joe Soap like myself to get this money out of their Cusick number? Either the answer is yes or the answer is no. Please.
Oh, absolutely. The answer is yes. And if you go and see one of the money traders and ask them, so look, could you look up this birth certificate bond and see where it's trading, and give me the Cusick number for it. I told you the easiest way is to go do a search on Securities Exchange Commission site, but there are people that you can apply to get it. Most of them are traders. They don't like to give this information out, but there are people who will give it out.
So you can actually, oh my God, we've started something here. So people can actually get some money out of this account in cash.
Well, I didn't actually say that, Barry.
I want the answer yes or no. Please, before we're driven mad with inquiries.
We will leave that for another show.
The answer, guys, ladies and gentlemen, don't ring up Bill, and please don't ring me or email me, because although this is factual, the getting of the money is a dream, and I think you're better off being healthy.
Well, I think until the people learn how to stay out of contract, Barry, unless you know how to stay out of contract, they will drag you back in every single time. So you've got to learn, the first thing that you must learn is staying out of contract. And I'm going to have to put a sort of a beginners or Billy's Basics video up and show you how to stay out of contract, because no matter how much I try and teach them, the moment that you put the paperwork in and you beat them with the paperwork, then they will give you a phone call. And it's that phone call that will get you back into contract every time. So you've got to learn to stay out of contract. And that's the hard part that people don't see.
They have to start thinking before they speak. And that's important, because every question they ask is the source of contract. And I think you and I and Melissa are pretty well aware of it. It's just getting that message across to the average man and woman. And that's the hardest part.
Barry, it's a very, very hard thing to learn, because we've been so conditioned or programmed into the corporate world that they've created for us, and we trusted them all this time. Now we have to break that trust and sort of start learning what the real world is, the world that they actually live in, which is the private ledger, the private side of the ledger.
Yeah, I think people are going to have to stop using the term government, because we do not have a government. They've made us as persons corporations. They're all corporations themselves, all the facilities and Justice Department, all private corporations. And until you realize, and I think people should look up Google or any other search engine and type in a person, and it will, a person in law, and it will tell them that it's a corporation. And until you realize you're nothing more than a bloody corporation. And even the cartoons on TV, everything is person. They've gone person crazy. And at this particular moment in time, at now time, I am not a person.
All right, Barry. Well, I hope that's cleared up a few of the questions, but created a few more, I understand. But okay, what you're doing on the PPSR is you're putting a lien on the title. Now, the title is the birth certificate. Now, when you put a lien on the title, now, what I told you at the conference was that possession is 9/10 of the law. The other 10th is title. So when you put a lien on the title, a lien is the highest form. A caveat can be removed. A lien can't be removed. So it's like a ship's lien. for wages. Seamen's wages are the highest priority. So if a bailiff goes down and nails a writ to the mast of a ship, that's exactly what you're doing when you register a claim against the title. Now, that claim against the title stops other people from coming in and looting your Treasury Direct account. So the only people you notify of your registration or your financing statement, you send a copy and a letter to the Minister of Commerce, whoever it is over there, the one who runs the PPSR. Over here, it's the Internal Affairs. So we send a letter to the minister along with our financing statements. Those are the only ones we have to notify. And the reason we notify them is so that they will stop plundering or being pirates and coming and robbing our treasure chest. Now, someone who hasn't checked on the PPSR, say a finance company or something like that, or a council trying to get parking tickets, suddenly comes to you with a parking ticket or something like that, you staple a copy of your financing statement to the ticket and send it back to them and saying, hey, look, there's a lien against this title. You come last in line. Does that help clarify it?
Sounds pretty good to me. Melissa, you got a few queries or questions from somebody?
Yeah, so I think that some of the problems were that people are actually showing that security agreement. Look, the security agreement has to be there for you to put anything on the PPSR. That security agreement has to be in place. That's not what you're showing people. Once you've registered that onto the PPSR, you're showing them that verification statement that you have.
Just show the verification of the registration of that financing statement. You don't need to show the financing statement, only the verification of it. And that should be enough. If that's showing that there is a lien on the title and that they cannot go and plunder that because they're pirates.
Mm-hmm.
And
so further to that, there were some queries. There are many queries on Barry's website there. I know that one of them related to things like the driver's license, whether to record it under as a chattel paper or whether it would be, or what else it would be apart from that. And I think I did say at the beginning that a recording of chattel paper would be something that is on paper and more like a contract or an agreement, whereas something where you've gone and applied for something like a license would be a document of title where you've got
exactly.
The title.
Any document you have from them or you've registered for some benefit, you've now put a lien against the document of title.
Oh, right.
Okay. So now, with what Barry's doing, showing the identity cards, that brings up a whole new set of circumstances when someone pulls you up or someone asks for ID, and they work.
Oh, yeah. It's a fiction world. This is who you are. It's got everything to say that you're not that deceased estate. End of story.
Another query there was in relation to registering a motor vehicle on the PPSR. And there are two queries in relation to that. One of them being whether to record a VIN number or whether to, just go by the plate number of the car. I kind of think that, VIN number's fine. That's what's being registered and you're showing a security interest against that registration. So
I'll give you a clue. Which instrument would the Cusick number be attached to?
Yeah, well, of course, a VIN number.
That makes sense, yes.
Yeah. So in that case, it's absolutely fine to put that VIN number. Don't get into some fear that you've got to have, sort of privatize it all first and you're putting like
You have to ask yourself the question, because we're securing title, what is the title of that car? It's not the number plate. They're holding the title. They've given us number plates, so they don't give you the title. They hold the title.
And they own the plates, so they just lent you the plates.
They're just an ID, but the title is the VIN number.
I've always had that theory when someone gets a parking ticket, it says to the owner, used to say to the owner, but nowadays we're now the registered keeper. The owner, being Vic Roads in this case in Victoria, they should pay the bill, really. Would that be fair?
Security interest in the beginning, there's a choice of whether it's commercial or consumer. So people have become a bit confused as to which one we're registering under, just because in the definitions, the key terminology of the PPSR, and I'll just bring up.
But just at a guess, I would say commercial, because you're not a consumer.
Yeah.
Because what I've tried to explain is all you're doing is putting a lien on the title. So a consumer, you're going out and buying stuff. You're not consuming anything.
And I'll just share my screen with you so you can see exactly where that confusion lies. Is consumer property. So under consumer property, it says for personal property held by an individual for private use only. And I think it was those words private use that caused a bit of confusion there. So they thought, well, if it's about private use, would that mean that we register under consumer property? But yeah, as you said.
Read commercial property there. Carrying on an enterprise or business to which an AFB is, that's the one you would be looking at.
Yeah, and even though, you know, under public trust, there may not be an ABN there, it's still that commercial property, because the surname entity is our transmitting utility. It's our agent in commerce. So that's what we want to put the lien against.
We've had a wonderful time again, Bill and Melissa. I am a little more confused than I was a half an hour ago, but I definitely absorbed quite a lot, and I hope the people out there have done the same. We will come back again, and we'll spend a little more time perhaps on it. It's an interesting subject, and it seems to go on and on forever. The more you learn, the more you need to know. So I'd like to thank Bill in New Zealand, and Melissa in Melbourne, and myself in Melbourne. Well, actually, we're not really. We're on a tropical island. We don't have information in case we get a virus and have to come home. And then, of course, there's no transportation. So life is really hard for us at the moment. We're all very fearful. Anyway, again, thanks for coming back on, guys. And I hope we've made a lot of people happy.
Well, goodbye from the Federal Reserve here. Thank you for...
Melissa,
thank you for having...
Yeah. Go ahead, Bill. Carry on.
Thank you for having me, and thank you, Melissa, for all the great work you're doing, and Barry for providing the platform.
Well, I hope the platform doesn't sink. Anyway, thanks, guys. Dr. Barry signing off, and goodbye for now, and catch you again soon.